Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, folks, for joining us for our second honors program colloquium, I think, of the spring 24 semester. I think that's right. Very happy today to be joined by my colleague, Dr. Laura Alford, Assistant Professor of Accounting here at A&M Texarkana. And Dr. Alford's going to be talking today about some research she's been doing on, as you can see on the screen, industrial political affiliation and state economic outcomes. This is from a forthcoming article. Is that?
Oh, it's our first draft.
First draft. So we'll say generously.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, I will turn it over to Dr. Alford, and we will have some time for questions at the end.
All right. I'd like to reiterate Dr. Nakashian's thanks for those of you who are attending. And on behalf of myself, my co-authors, Robert Egger, Stephen Hansen, and Judith Hermes, we all sort of met where we've all left the Naval Postgraduate School. And so we still do research together. And so Craig, if you would fast forward.
Of course. Sorry. Yeah, I have one job. Sorry.
About our industry, political affiliation, and state economic outcomes. And so our research question is, how does the political affiliation of industry sectors impact a state's economic activity? And so if you'll forward to the next one, what we know is sort of, this is my very own graphic designed by an accountant. So please keep your comments on the graphic, complimentary, but there is a large body of evidence that looks at what I call sort of a roundabout of two-way streets. And so a lot of research focuses on CPA, which is not an accountant, it says corporate political activity between firms and industry and government. And so if you look at that bottom line, firms and industry support via contributions, lobby, and they appoint former government officials to their boards, typically higher regulated industries do a lot of that. And so in return, what they get are lower regulations. They have to suffer fewer SEC enforcement actions. They get special favors. They get the good contracts. And so you've got that street right there between the federal government and firms and industry. Between firms and industry and states, you've got states who want firms and industry to come to their state because that provides jobs and economic activity to the state. And what the state provides is a favorable environment for the firms to come, notably tax policies, but also some firm headquarters are seen to want states that have good transportation. They want to be close to an airport. They want to have good infrastructure. And so states agree to build exit ramps and just different things like that for industries. And then between your states and your federal government, states are represented in Congress in the federal government, and we chose to use senators. A lot of the research looks at representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, but a U.S. senator is elected to represent the entire state. And we felt that was a good measure. And so the states are represented in Congress, and the federal government appropriates money back to the states. And so those senators have to vote on all of the appropriations bills. And so there are things like Medicare, education, but specifically kind of related to business, the FAA and the federal transportation. So the FAA in 2022, I believe, had $3.9 billion that was appropriated to them for disbursement to states for airports and things like that. And there was over 13 billion in 2023 in transportation. So all of these different agencies, receive money. And so states sort of lobby for those funds. So you've got these two-way streets between these parties. And then all of that is encompassed by a political party affiliation. And generally people affiliate with a party in order to sort of push their larger agenda, right? We're more impactful if we're together rather than a single individual trying to do that. And what we hope is that state and federal government policies that their whole purpose is to make the lives of the people better. And so we're hoping that they can do that in some sort of way. And so this is kind of a brief summary of our lit review. And so then what we know are these things. And then Craig, if you'll advance speak. Well, what we're missing is that, first of all, open source and the Federal Election Committee data is a subset of all the money spent. So it doesn't encompass all of the money. They categorize industry categorizations, don't line up with any other kind of industry categorization system that we have. not all Democrats and Republicans are created equal. Some are very liberal, some are very conservative, others are middle of the road. And also a lot of those prior research papers look at maybe individual, not just an industry, but like an individual bank. So like if you were a bank during the financial crisis and you had a CPA and an affiliation with somebody who was on the US Senate Banking Committee, which could only be a few banks, you got a better deal. You got earlier bailouts, you got more favorable terms and all these other things. So looking at it industry wide has not really been done. So we're going to work on this metric.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're looking at is we're looking at our industry political affiliation, and this is going to be over the time period 1999 to 2020. And that's because one of our, we get a lot of our data from the census that kind of starts in 97, but one of our control variables doesn't become available till 99. So that's where we start. And so we've got, first of all, a continuous measure of political orientation that's nominate that comes from a US roll call database. And we combine that with a measure of the value of an industry. So that's our state industry payroll that's available through the US Census. And we create an index which gets our industry's yearly political affiliation. So to go more into these, so specifically nominate one, that looks at the votes. So I can affiliate with whatever party I want, but I might vote differently. I might cross party lines. So these scores range from a -1 liberal to a +1 conservative. This, somebody else is, figuring this out. And what we do, we've got 2 senators in every state. Most of the time, so a Congress is for 2 years. And so they're doing the vote by Congress. And so like 99 and 2000, I'm not sure of those numbers, but there'll be 2 years in a Congress and you'll have 2 people in there. And so we average those. If for some reason somebody goes to be a part of a national party, is not a senator for the whole term, we do a weighted average to get their score. And so in this particular instance for 2012, Indiana in 2012 had their nominate score is 0.3395. So they lean a little bit conservative in 2012. And Massachusetts with the negative would be leaning a little bit liberal in 2012. Okay, so we've got our state nominate scores. And then we're going to combine that, Craig, if you would go to the next one, with our 2-digit payroll. So we have 2-digit payroll for almost everything except for some manufacturing and mega sectors because the US Census combined it for a couple of years to make things difficult for researchers. And so we look at industry payroll, and that's given to us in thousands. So if we look at the 2 states that we had earlier, 2012, mining, which is industry 12, Indiana had $398 million worth of mining. I looked up, I'm like, what the heck are they mining? Maybe a little coal, maybe some for concrete in play. So they're doing a little bit of mining, 98 million payroll in Indiana. And Massachusetts had about 73.5 million in 2012. So that's a state payroll in that industry sector. And of course, we do that for all industry sectors, all states over the whole time period. Okay. But to put these two together, it's going to look like this. So if we just take those numbers that we just had, and this is a very, very tiny selection. So we've got 2012, these 2 states, Indiana and Massachusetts. Nominate one, which is sort of how their senators are voting in that year. That's their revealed partisanship rather than their declared partisanship. And we've got their payroll numbers in that particular sector. And we do a weighted average. So 0.3395. This is a summation. So the 3395 times their payroll. It says minus because it's a negative. So plus and minus is a minus. 1.112 times their payroll over the sum of all of the payroll in that industry across the states. And so in this particular example, very, 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 very limited because it only does 2 states. The mining IPA would be 0.2692. Okay, so we do that, and then if you go to the next one, what we see here is sort of a selection of industries over our sample period. And so that top one is mining. So that's going to be your oil, gas, coal extraction. It trended sort of kind of level there, but over recent years, since about 2010, it has become increasingly conservative. The blue line at the bottom is information. That's going to be based out of California. That is trending more liberal. Your average, which I think that's the red line, is kind of around but slightly liberal. And then agriculture, which is sort of a surprise, is also average. But there's a lot of agriculture in Washington and California, which are big, their senators are very liberal. So first of all, we calculate this industry political affiliation measure. And next. Then what we want to do is we want to bring that back to the state level. And so every state has multiple industries. And so we use the state industry payroll data to weight the national industry affiliation. So what we've got is our national affiliation for each industry based on our state industry index. So that's going to give us our SIPA, our SIPA. And that is our measure of our overall political orientation of the industries in a state. So let's look at how we calculate that. So we take the sum of our IPA, which we just calculated, right? So that's going to be a negative for information, times our state year payroll for each industry over the summation of the state year payroll for each industry. So if we look at our Indiana, and we're going to assume there are only 2 industries in Indiana in 2012, which are mining and finance. Mining and finance. So the payroll for mining in Indiana is $397.8 million. And it's like, is that $1 billion? We put some more zeros on that finance, 5-something billion for finance. Okay. Finance is headquartered, most of finance is in New York. So that's going to be, you can see that the coefficient on the IPA there is a negative and that mining is a 0.26. And so because your payroll for finance is so much larger than the payroll for mining, your overall SIPA for Indiana using these two examples is a negative 0.0019. So they're going to trend this is super simple, but this is how we calculate our SIPA measure. Yes, go ahead and go to the next one. So for 2020, and so this will change. Like we could do this for every single year and our map changed. So we did it in basically 2000 and there was a lot more red. Even California was red because that was sort of the follow-up of the Reagan years. Around 2010, everybody was blue because President Obama had just been elected. So there was more blue. Right now, this is kind of our current state of affairs, and it matches a lot of what we've seen in the political arena to date, with the blue on the coasts and the red and flyover land. So I think our range, though, but go back, Craig.
Oh, sorry. I was a little too enthusiastic.
I know you're too enthusiastic.
There we go.
So if you look, so Alaska, that's not a surprise that Alaska's red because that's a lot of oil and gas, but Hawaii is a little bit pink. And Hawaii has very liberal senators, but because the industries in Hawaii are not, that's travel and education, entertainment, they're not manufacturing, they're not liberal industries. The senators are going to what? They're going to vote to support the home industries. They're going to vote in a way that benefits their industry. So you can kind of see that this sort of makes sense with what's going on in each state. And so you can see Texas, you would think, oh, Texas is an oil country and it'd be super red, but it's not. So, and they've got that maybe because Austin's got a lot of information coming in there. So we don't really know. More will be revealed.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Now we can go.
Next we can go. So back to our research question. This is sort of okay. This is what we know. This is the literature. This is how we've developed our measure. Does SIPA affect the state economy? So does it work? Like all of this lobbying the state should be doing things for their people, but does it turn out?
Hmm.
And so there is some prior work that's shown a link between conservative state senators and a higher gross state product or state personal income. So we're gonna see if our measure, because that's a published work, is our measure incremental to theirs? So kind of replicate that with our measure in it. And so we're gonna use, we log both the state gross state product, which is similar to the GDP for states, and personal income. And we regress our SIPA and state nominate, because we want to see if it's incremental to the state nominate plus our control variables onto those two Y's. So if you go to the next one, this is going to be a list of our control variables. The first is something called Camelot Government. So it's a prudent state government index. The Camelot index is they have a lot of different indices. The source for that is federal funds information. But this particular prudent government index looks at the percent of state and local taxes as a percent of your income, solvency, funding, bond ratings. And so you want to be a 1, okay? You don't want to be 50. So some of these are reverse,
Yeah.
what do you call that? Reverse categorized.
Sure.
We look at the union percentage, which is your percentage of non-agriculture hourly and salary employees that are union members in a state, because that has an impact. We look at energy costs. How much is, are your BTUs per for your state? What is the median income in dollars? And we only run median income in dollars when we're looking at GSP. We don't run that as a control variable when we're looking at this personal income, because that's dumb. Like, you wouldn't put it in there twice. You've been on both sides, that wouldn't work. And we look at government expenditures per capita but they're government expenditures excluding welfare per capita. That comes from the census. And then Craig, we've got more, but
that's more.
There's more.
Nice.
We look at our hourly earnings for manufacturing employees in a state. We look at the college percentage, everybody over age 25 that has a college degree. We look at the state population, right? If you've got more people working, you're going to have higher income. We look at also the percent of the vote captured by a winning Democratic governor and a winning Republican governor, just to see if we're, making sure we kind of pull those out. And so what we get, once we do this regression, I know this is kind of hard to see, but our SIPA measure is, the coefficient on that is a 0.32025, which indicates that places with conservative policies tend to have a higher gross state product and a higher personal income. Other things that impact the personal income and gross state product are college percent. So the more college educated people you have, the better off your state is. Higher state populations are going to have a higher gross product and a gross personal income. Union percents, negative coefficient. So the more unions, the less gross state product and your lower income. And I'm gonna talk about energy costs later. Government spending per capita is positive, and so is energy cost. And so what we kind of think is that there's just some sort of unobservable something going on where we can't see why our energy, why would higher energy costs make people better off? Unless it's because higher energy costs occur in our more populous states, and there's something going on that makes it that way. Now, our R-square on this, our adjusted R-square is really high. And so we're like, okay, we've overfitted this model. We did state fixed effects, and I think we clustered our standard error. So I'm not sure right now we're not going to do the state fixed effects. We've got to rerun it. Yeah. But these were the same, these variables were all significant regardless of which Y variable we used. So on the next slide, we ran this with actual numbers, and a 0.01 increase in SIPA would lead to a $233 million increase in state GSP. And it's incremental to the state nominate. So it's kind of stands on its own. And then the next part is, go ahead.
No, next one, sorry.
The next one.
Oh.
is
There we go.
where are we going from here? So we've got to do something about our R squared. I'm not really sure, but our basic idea is, I think maybe where we're going here is if there's a significant gap between your industry affiliation and your state senators, voting, then is industry going to invest to get them to move towards industry? And so, we've looked at that, the change in the state nominate, and just preliminary results, it looks like, the SIPA does move, that they will move towards that. And so and also I think that's one is to look at the change. And we're gonna run it without the fixed effects, because that might be, that R square is just too high. It's an overfitted model, which you would think would be hard to do with a cross-section panel, but we did it.
Yeah,
We did it.
figure it out.
And so that's kind of it. This is
Okay.
short and sweet. We said we only have like 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you've got questions.
No, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, first off. We do like to keep them nice and short. So we have plenty of time.
Lunchtime.
It is also lunchtime, yes. So our Zoom friends may be indulging in lunch right now. I don't know. So I will open it up to questions. If you have a question on Zoom, feel free to drop it in the chat or just unmute and ask it. It's fine. If we've got a question in the room, Dr. Minton, what do you got?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, did you run a naive model just to see what that
Well,
score was by itself and what that that R score was by itself?
Just
Just,
do it with SIPA?
yeah, just do it with
Okay,
SIPA
yeah.
because of, can you go back to the results real?
Yeah,
quick, or
sure.
that, the statistical
Yeah.
results?
There you go.
One more.
Or the one
Oh,
more.
one more.
The,
Apologies. There you go.
Okay, so SIPA was significant.
Just-
I'm
yeah.
just trying to figure out, because what I found in some cases, like my independent variable will be incredibly significant, but the actual effect is very small. So there's one variable in there that's driving this, that's making it that.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see what
because
you're saying. So
yeah.
run it and see what it is
Well,
without
just
that.
isolate each of those variables
Okay.
to see,
Okay.
okay, oh, this one's explaining 85% of variance,
Right.
right? And then it's like, okay, well, these other ones can be helpful, but
Okay. that's
there's
a
that
good-
one that's kind of that underlying.
Right,
base
which
because-
one of these is the one?
Yeah, because explaining 99.5% of variance is pretty impressive.
Right, with over from 1999 to 2020, over 50 states.
Yeah,
Like-
that's
Just,
you're batting almost 1,000, right?
I'm just that good.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it's like, then it's like, okay, well, yeah, we figured it out, right?
Yeah.
Which, as scientists, we would love that,
Well,
but yeah,
yeah,
that does seem
that's
a
a-
little.
That is way too high. So we've got to figure out which one of these. I agree. That's a great idea. We'll see which one of these is driving it and what that is.
Yeah,
I don't know, this would probably be very popular in certain states, right?
Well-
Vote conservative, make more money. Yeah, let's do it.
Well-
Well, so it's, yeah, I mean, now on our authors, we got two pretty far to the right, one way on the left, and then I'm actually in the middle.
No, I get it, man.
I'm in the middle.
No, this
as
reminds
much-
me,
As much as an accounting professor can be in the middle,
Right.
I'm in the middle.
well, I have very little to contribute in the sense of statistical modeling or anything. I will simply say it reminds me of an episode of Yes, Prime Minister that I watched last night about putting industry people into governmental positions, and it was the tobacco industry because this was the mid-80s, and yeah, unrelated to anything you're doing in the sense. But right, I wonder about that sort of that tie-in between industry lobbying, but then also former politicians going directly into industry lobbying and so forth. I find that interesting. So political affiliation itself wasn't particularly relevant in this discussion, right?
Not the state nominate,
Yeah.
the state nominate was not, but
That's interesting.
where the governors wasn't, the Democratic governors. And so like their research papers on, okay, you got a Democrat governor, they're gonna spend more on education and maybe healthcare than a Republican, but doesn't really, so there's research on governors, there's
Yeah.
research, but there's,
I wonder if we'll see more. I wonder if we'll see this effect less as political affiliation and ideology become more unified, right? Like I am wondering about that. Like back in the day, you used to be able to get away with being a Democrat who was pro gas and oil if you were in Texas, or a Republican who was pro whatever if you were in Massachusetts. Not that there were many Republicans in Massachusetts. I was one of the few. But I'm wondering, I don't know, that'd be interesting from a political side. We do have a question on chat. Jeff asks, what is your take on the business exodus we are seeing from states like California, New York, and Massachusetts to Florida, Texas, Tennessee, due to high taxation, high crime, etc.? Your research is impressive, and thank you for presenting. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Well,
Appreciate
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the tax rates in are driving that. And so the main research paper was a 2014 paper. And it's just really super clear that there's a point, like a certain percent in tax rate, people just leave in droves.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're seeing is that, as taxes increase, people are gonna leave because they've reached that threshold on their curve. So, there are gonna be more tax-friendly states
Yeah, come on in.
are gonna.
No, it's 2 days.
Oh, you're
You're not
fine.
feeling
We're having a
You're not
discussion.
feeling it. We're talking about R squared being too high.
Yeah.
You're just the person we need.
Yeah.
We're just the person
Huh.
we need, guys.
So that's
So-
interesting.
Yeah, but I think that's what's driving it. Let me just see it. I can't remember the study, but it was a 2014 study and
Yeah.
also headquarters are moving and headquarters aren't necessarily tied to location,
Yeah.
but headquarters are moving. And when the headquarters moves, the governor and his party gets kicked out. So you don't want to be the governor that loses the headquarters.
Right.
So there is a change and it doesn't matter what they are, the other people get to come in. It doesn't, so whoever lost the headquarters gets in trouble.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, this is in line with what we've kind of seen, I guess, in the political arguments over the years. If you have a higher percentage of unions, business doesn't love that necessarily. So my question on the union one in particular, like my background is history mostly, dabble a little bit in political science at the amateur level. Are those purely private sector unions or are those including public employee unions?
I think we got that from union.com. So I think that's gonna be all the unions.
Oh, it'd be all of them. Interesting. Okay. I wonder if there'd be a way to kind of clarify that percentage down to the private sector unions, what's left of them. Just because I know that in places like California and such, your public employee unions are huge.
Well,
But I don't know that matters, honestly. Like I said, I'm way outside my realm for this.
Right, just because like Texas has.
Thanks, Jeff.
Like 5% like are a part of like unions that are like as far as the labor force.
Yeah, it's
and
tiny.
Texas is very small.
Tiny, yeah.
But California is pretty high, but there are also some conservative states that have pretty high labor unions because they're in the mining industry.
Right.
Which
Right,
would
where
be
you-
counterintuitive as
Right.
far as like conservative
Right.
policy. So that might be where
Well,
you're seeing
Yeah.
kind of an interesting.
I wonder if we filtered it out and I'll have to check and see, but
Okay, I'm
like
just curious.
UPS is union and
FedEx
FedEx
is
is
not.
not union.
Right.
So even transportation is not.
Yeah.
And
No, it's interesting.
there might be, I guess interrelated effects there between like type of union, like or type of labor union potentially, but that's a biggest thing because like if you have unions, they are mobilized at much higher rates. You're going to care about their votes a lot more. Where in Texas,
Yeah.
you don't have labor unions. So other than education, is a pretty big labor union for like K through 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe police unions as well, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
public,
police
that's
union,
public
but-
sector though.
But those are, again, not super big parts of the
Yeah.
population, so I
That's a
mean,
good point.
you're not going to be beholden to them as a senator.
Yeah.
Right, whereas if you lose mining or something like that.
Yeah, if you lose
so
money in
like
West Virginia, that's not
you're-
good.
Yeah, you're screwed.
Yeah, you're not gonna be very
So,
popular. That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm just trying to think, even if it is a public sector union. So the federal government does still send money for education.
Yeah.
You'll get money for education. So I think even if it's a public entity union, it would still be relevant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the federal government sends money down for highways.
Yeah. It's a-
Education, they get the federal No Child Left Behind dollars, they get the federal lunch program dollars, there's.
Sure.
lots
Okay.
of- Lots of money.
Cool. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? At least for the official part of the presentation? Okay. In that
Thank you
case,
very much.
thank you again, Dr. Alford. Well done. I will go ahead and get this edited and put online if that's okay. For those of you who might have missed it, I will put it on the A&M Texarkana Honors Program YouTube channel.
I will live in perpetuity.
There it is. You will be immortalized to our followers for all time. So thank you, folks. We will see you after spring break with a presentation by Dr. Kathy Lease, and I will send out more information about that later.